Kevin Kelly, it's my honor. Welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. I'm a big fan of yours. Thanks for taking the time to do this today.
I am really, really delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me, and it's going to be a blast. Thanks.
Absolutely. I've been following your blogs for quite some time, and I was really excited to see that you were coming out with a book. Before we get into it, most of the conversation today is going to be about your brand new book, Excellent Advice for Living Wisdom I Wish I Had Known Earlier. Before we get into it, I like to ask authors, why this book? Why right now? What's the genesis behind the book?
So, the book began at a habit of mine of collecting little bits of wisdom. I just really enjoyed other people's aphorisms and proverbs. I've been, from going to Catholic grade school and hearing the Gospels, there was a lot of great little bits of advice, you have to say, do unto others as you like to do them, or um, give unto Caesar's what's Caesar's. I mean, there were just lots of really great bits of advice, and then they always struck with me. And I collected others, and I liked the way that these proverbs and aphorisms could condense an entire book of wisdom and knowledge and put it into a little repeatable reminder. And that's what I was sort of trying to do with this book, was to do my own versions of reminders for myself originally. And then I decided that because we didn't really give much advice to our kids growing up, that I wished I had had some of this stuff earlier. So I decided I would put it down onto paper or into words and give it to them as a present. And so I did that on my 68th birthday. I did the first batch. I didn't know it was more, but I just tried to do it. I had a whole bunch, and they were successful, and I realized I had more to say. I kept doing it online, where it's kind of the native place for these little tweetable things. But I got so many of them that it just made sense to put them into one convenient set that you can hand to somebody instead of trolling through Twitter or the internet. And so the origin was originally, again, help to me be reminded, and then to help my kids be reminded.
I love the bite size too. I mean, with the world that we're living today, you've talked about before that our attention span is a lot shorter than it's ever been, especially for kids. And so the Twitter sized, bite sized information is so key. I'm curious. Wisdom is a word that I love, and it's one that pops up obviously on your cover. Kevin, what does wisdom mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Wisdom to me, I would say, is there's sort of like in computer language, computer hacker programming terms, they talk about heuristics. Heuristics are they're they're little formulas, they're little routines that guide something. They're not infallible. They're like rules of thumb. They're meant to be slightly vague and oversized and somewhat imprecise in order to cover a lot. And so wisdom to me is this sense of guidance, of directing, of saying it's sort of like the right direction, or something that you can use to guide you to, and then there's a value judgment assigned to it. It's not just guidance, it's guidance in a certain direction, and that direction is, goodness, beauty, truth. And so there is a sense of I would say a biases. There's a bias towards good, and there is an actionable bias towards good. So it's a great question. Obviously, I'm just rambling, but I think that maybe I would conclude by saying that it's kind of an actionable bias towards good.
I love it. We're going to get into some of those today. And I went through the book twice and I was able to
Mhm.
pull out a couple themes of the book. And one of the themes that I want to get into first with you, Kevin, is the theme of, or the principle of generosity. There's
Yeah.
a couple quotes I'm going to throw out and I would just love to get your opinion on it. So on one of the pages, it says this quote, "Perhaps the most counterintuitive truth of the universe is that the more you give to others, the more you'll get. Understanding this is the beginning of wisdom." Maybe this is a great place to start.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it is a paradox of our human condition in the universe that there is this weird thing that when you give away, you're given more back than you gave away, and that's true for everybody. And mathematically, that doesn't make any sense. You're right. The arithmetic does not add up, and so, but it's true, and it's not only true, but it's incredibly dependable. Sort of like the most selfish thing you can do is to give stuff away. All right. I mean, it's like that's so reliable that you could say that's the most selfish thing you can do. And why that is, it's hard to say why, but all I can say is it's absolutely true. And I think it works because the default of the universe seems to be abundance, that there is more than enough, and that you're tapping into that abundance by giving it away. And this is true not just in terms of like with our social interactions, which is of course obviously true in terms of helping other people, but it's also I think true in terms of our creative impulses and making stuff. And so um, one of the things that artists and entrepreneurs and other people kind of realize if they're wise is that um, the foundation and the source of their creativity is always improved by doing things on a regular basis, by doing it again and again. Quantity actually matters, and the more you do that, the more you realize that it's bottomless. It's there's a curious thing that the more you produce, the more you realize that well is bottom. So you kind of increase the depth of the well by generating it, and um, giving those away. Um, you, you when you do this every day, you get confidence that you can give things away, right? That you can help someone else. Because that's a practice. That's what it is, and that there's more from where that's come from. So even in creative pursuits, whether you're writing songs or writing a book or creating a new product or inventing a new device, and in terms of your inventions, it takes some people are always find it very precious. They're hiding it. They don't want people to know about it. They generally don't prosper. It's the ones who are very prolific and giving away and generous and maybe not even patent them because they say, "Oh, I don't need to patent it. I can make another one just like that." And I have other reasons, other ways to protect it. That's the spirit of the generous universe. That's saying that there is an abundance of ideas. There is an abundance of material. There really isn't scarcity except our attention and our own time. And when we give that, that's really very, very, very powerful. So so I think understanding that this is the general dynamic and that the general default of humans is not selfishness, but actually generosity. That most people will generally be generous if you give them the chance, and that you can trust strangers overall, and that most people will do good than bad. We're taught the opposite, but those who come to understand that it's not that way can really prosper in a way that's really amazing.
And additionally, too, from a monetary standpoint, there's two quotes that are kind of tongue in cheek, and I think they're great. First one is, "Be more generous than necessary. No one on their deathbed has ever regretted giving too much away. There's no
Right,
point in being the richest person in the cemetery." And then the
right.
other one I love, Aim to die broke. Give to your beneficiaries before you die. It's more fun and useful to them. Spend it all. Your last check should go to the funeral home and it should bounce.
Right.
Talk to me about it from a monetary standpoint.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, money's a very funny thing. I mean, it's very high status in our society right now. Um, there's another related bit of advice, which is don't make money to create uh to create stuff. Or don't create things to make money to create stuff. And this came from Walt Disney, who said, we don't make movies to make money. We make money so we can make movies. Okay. And so um I have a friend, Tim Riley, he talks about it, money being gas. It's like the whole purpose of money is it's like gasoline. You want gas to put in your car to go drive around, but it's not like you're driving around to get different gas stations. That's not the collecting gas. That's not the story. See how much gasoline you can get. No, no, no. The gas is fuel to do stuff. And so accumulating is tricky. And dispensing it is even trickier because people oftentimes feel it very hard won and they're very reluctant to give it away. But another piece of advice is that, if you give 10% of what you collect in a year, that seems like a loss that you're giving up 10% of your, but actually what happens with that 10% is that you get like 1,000% comes back to you in terms of your joy and the good and the sheer peace and prosperity that will come from that is way beyond the 10%. So you don't need, you probably won't even notice a 10% diminishing in your purchasing power, but you will notice 100% difference in your state of mind and your enjoyment of life.
Mm.
And so that is that's part of it, but there's many other aspects of money that are worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one more quote I think that fits really well in the generosity, and it stopped me in my track that says, "No one is as impressed with your possessions as you are." It made me go, huh,
Yeah.
interesting. I couldn't agree more. I think this fits in the generosity bucket. Can you open it up?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's I mean the image they always have is, some guy driving up in a, I don't know, a Porsche or something. And it's like, I don't know. I'm not I don't think, oh, this is a really amazing person. That's kind of the opposite. It's like, what does he need? What's he really looking for? And so uh it's, yeah, your possessions are they're cheap in a certain sense, and you don't want to let them take over. And that's another bit of advice is, if you do collect something, if you do have a passion for things, which is fabulous, then you want to display them. You want to be front and center. Otherwise, you become a hoarder and just trying to pack things away. So possessions are fine as long as they aren't compensating for other things in your life. I think it's really fabulous to to be passionate about something and to get to the really bottom of it. And I have another piece of advice too about you should be as thrifty as you possibly can in your life, except around your passions. And in a certain sense, you should be thrifty in order to splurge on your passions. And so there may be something among your possessions that you are passionate about, but it should derive from that rather than trying to impress, because nobody's impressed by it.
Absolutely. Another theme as we flip the page here that I really loved, and I think I'm a little bit biased here, Kevin, being a podcaster myself, but I think that there was a lot of quotes that fit in what I would call the conversation category, how to have good conversations with people. And I think the first one is the rule of three in
Yeah.
conversation. To get to the real reason, ask a person to go deeper than what they just said, then again, and then once more. The third time's answer is the closest to the truth. As we start to talk about conversations here in a conversation, let's break that one open.
Yeah. Well, that came from Esther Perel, the legendary therapist.
Mhm.
And this applies particularly in very intimate conversations where you are getting deep or emotional conversations and, you know, you're trying to figure out what's going on or some you're trying to explain what's going on. And there's a kind of there's like the first order easy answer, which is true in a certain sense. But there's going to be a deeper motive, a deeper reasoning, and you, the listener, have to ask. It just doesn't. You've got to press, and then what you learn is that you need to go at least a third time to go even deeper to get that subterranean thing, and that it's in some ways a gift to the other person that you are sitting with them, helping them do that. They need oftentimes someone else to help them force that because it may be uncomfortable. And that's another piece of advice is that you're mature to the extent that you're willing to have uncomfortable conversations. And that's going to three deep is one of the ways that you do that. Um, I mean, I don't think every conversation needs a three. Like, uh, where'd you go on your vacation? Okay, yeah, we went to Peru. We saw this, but you can, in conversation, you can pursue that. Well, what did you see there? That was really great, and you can kind of go deeper. And as you do, you will get more genuine, emotional, you know, more intimate responses.
You said the word difficult conversations, and this was another quote that stopped me in my tracks as well. It says, "Your growth as a mature being is measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations you are willing to have." Talk
Right?
to me about that. That makes me shake in my boots a little bit.
Yeah. It's again, it's easy to have the easy conversations, and so you learn something, but it's not. Um, you may not make much progress, or I mean, it's just hard to get someone to reveal themselves and their vulnerabilities and their weaknesses. And there's nobody that I know of who's really comfortable in that. There are some show off people who like to exhibit that, but most of us are reluctant to disclose things that we're struggling with, that we really are struggling with. And so it requires somebody to mirror that in terms of truly listening and saying, yes, I really do want to know. I will sit with you and go through that process. I will I'll sit in the discomfort because it's also discomforting for the other person to hear. And they're saying, I'm willing to suffer with you a little bit. Okay. And so that willingness to join in the uncomfort and share that allows that other person to share that. And so um that's good for both sides. That's good for everybody. And oftentimes, as we know, this is another piece of advice is broader than this, which is like, talking through this is what therapy is. Just talking through it often has a remedy in it. There's also something therapeutic about it. And so good things can come from that. And so that's wisdom. That's a general heuristic headed towards good, which is that if you can do that, um, you will grow. Person that you're sitting with will grow, and that's good.
So we both know that the outcome to uncomfortable conversations is typically a good thing, but sometimes it's hard to step into that. And I would love to hear if you have any advice for people that have a hard time initiating uncomfortable conversations. For me, Kevin, what I think about is, and it's hard for me too, but I'll just put it out there to my counterpart, say, look, This is going to be a little bit uncomfortable for me. This is going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but it's really on my heart. Do you have any applicable advice for people who have trouble with the uncomfortable and just really the starting of it? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think you did a great suggestion of admitting, or framing it as saying, this is uncomfortable for me, and I'm not, but I suspect that it's important. Um, other Well, one of the things that we all learn from is having role models, is having seen it succeed elsewhere, or other people, or in the past. And so I think another thing that might help people who are reluctant is to actually see how other people do it. Like Esther Perel is a fantastic one. She has a podcast where they have couples. She does couple therapy, and they record it,
Mm.
and you can see her in action, and you can see the people in action, and those kinds of things can also help inspire you and give you confidence that this is going to work out. The fear, of course, is this uncomfortable conversation. It'll kind of like, it'll just erupt. It'll just be nasty. It'll go nowhere, and everybody will be hurt. And what you have to have is a little bit of confidence that that's not the inevitable direction. And so maybe having some examples, seeing how it works and other places, other people, can give you the confidence to try it yourself.
There's another word in your book that you mention a lot, and it's my favorite word. And I circled it several times. I'd like to read three quotes, and the word is curious. The
Mm,
quote first one is, "For a greater payoff, be especially curious about the things you are not
mm.
interested in." Another one says, "Curiosity is fatal to certainty. The more curious you are, the less certain you'll be." And then the third, "Be curious about another person's view is the most powerful way to change their view." I love curiosity. I love asking my guests about curiosity. It's important to you as well, it seems. Talk to me about why it's so important to be curious.
Well, why is it important? Well, curious is goes hand to hand with learning, and I think it's important, and growth. So basically, what it comes down to, this is another avenue for growth, being curious. And uh, the thing about growth and our own development and our own growth is that we are very slow to find out, or to figure out which direction to go into, who we should become. And so, because of our own ignorance and obscurity to ourselves, we want to be curious to try and help us discover who we are and who we want to be. We have to kind of try things. That's the thing that, child rearing, we all parents are kind of introducing their kids to all kinds of things. You're, as a parent, you're being curious. It's like, what's my kid really interested in? It's hard to tell when they're born. And so you're trying, you have to be kind of curious with your children. Like, do you like sports? Are you good at sports? What about painting and art? And so you're being curious about them, and you're introducing things that you may not even, the best parenting is you may not even be interested in these things, but maybe your children are. And so you're being curious and allowing them to grow, to kind of become the people that they should be and want to be. And that, so I think that's sort of the aim of that curiosity, is our own development and trying to be our authentic true selves, the best people we can be. And as I said, we are pretty obscure. Another bit of advice I talk about is that, the only you can't become your best self by yourself. We need everybody else. You need the entire world to help you make you unique. It's kind of a paradox too. And so uh that being curious is part of that process of how we learn to be ourselves, to learn to be what it is that we're here to do that nobody else can do. Those are really high bars, and it requires a certain curiosity about yourself and the world in order to do that. And I like the idea myself of being curious in things that you aren't interested in, um, because again, you, you may wind up becoming very interested in them. Um, and there's lots of things in my own life that I had no idea or interest in, but turned out later on that actually I was interested in these, or I became interested in them. And so I'm a huge YouTube fanatic, and I have subscribed to close to 400 channels, and I keep adding them, and I watch way, way too much. But the thing about it is, I watch about things that I'm not really kind of interested in, but I'm curious about them because a lot of other people are, because there's huge subcultures. Like I watched for a while a lot of makeup videos. I have zero interest. I mean, it's like I'm not like secretly making up. It's just like I have, but it was so riveting. There was such a subculture going on there that I was curious about it. And watching, and having them recommend and going down deep into it was very, very interesting. And I, before that, I had no interest in it at all, but I was curious.
We place a high value on curiosity. I truly think it's life changing when you start seeing life through a curiosity lens. And not
Right.
to mention that we're in this conversation talking about conversations. When you're talking with somebody and you're generally curious, it totally makes them feel heard, seen, loved. When you're asking questions, it really changes the dynamic of the relationship when you're able to get curious about somebody. I'm curious to ask you, what about the people that curiosity maybe doesn't come as natural to them or they struggle with it? Maybe they hear us today, Kevin. They're like, man, I really would love to be that way. It's just not very
Mhm.
easy for me.
Yeah.
What's the advice there?
How to cultivate curiosity in yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I don't think I have any good suggestions because I've been a naturally curious person. Um, I think I'm thinking of our kids, and how maybe we try to help them be curious. I think, uh, again, maybe having, you take little baby steps and you're rewarded along the way. And I think, um, one way would be to kind of make sure or you can be rewarded for the initial steps in being curious. So you're just a little bit curious. And so, um, if I was doing it with kids, I would make sure that there was like a payoff or even a little bit of initial foray into that. And oftentimes, um, one way to do that, I think, is to try to go at least a little deep, because you sometimes need to, superficially, it may not seem worthwhile, but if you can get to a certain depth, then it can reveal its power and its interest. And so there is maybe a certain level that you would need to push something, or to step further to get close enough that you could begin to see what was there. So yeah, like if you were like, I don't know, horse breeding. I just happen to see a picture of horse. Okay, horse breeding. Well, I'm not really interested in horse breeding, I don't think, but I may be curious about it. And so I would like to hear enough about it, to get deep enough into it that you could begin to pick up something, and maybe find something that resonates with what you already care about. And so, that is, again, that's like a practice. It's like a habit. It's like, getting there. So if I was working with kids or whatever, it would be like, okay, we'll pick something at random and we'll see how far we get. And then, you can say, oh, that's fun. I didn't realize that. Let's try that again. We'll go a little bit further in something completely other, randomly or generated in some way. And it would become, um, something that you could accumulate. And that reflects another bit of advice I have in the book about prototyping your life instead of having grand plans. This idea of iterative, doing things again and again, and iteratively trying to get better, something they call deliberate practice, where you're you're practicing not just repeating it, but you're practicing it to move it forward. And that idea, I think, is true in learning, and learning whether to be more curious or something else, is that you want to be surrounded by people who are also doing it and seeing what happens to them, seeing that it's fun for other people, or that they gain something from it. So that's a secondary thing, is surrounding yourself with successful models of other people doing it.
Sounds to me while you're talking, I'm listening here. It sounds to me like the being curious. Another way to be curious is just simply, Kevin, to be open minded.
Yeah, open-minded is part of that, and a quality that's really good. There's what's it called? A caveat about it. There's an old joke about, if you're open-minded, then you can get your mind filled with garbage.
Sure,
And I know people who are kind of like too open-minded, in the sense
sure.
of accepting, too gullible, accepting things. So there is a sense, though, of wanting to try things on, but they should also be evaluated. If you should use them and try them out. So there's a kind of two-step process that's essential in my eyes for any kind of creative endeavor, whether it's producing work or learning a new idea or a belief, which is, the initial step is very, very loose and very promiscuous and very open, and you're trying everything and there's no judgment. That's the creator thing. When you're trying to write it, you're writing words and you're not judging what you write. When you're doing a first draft of a song, you don't apply the critic to it. But then there's an essential second step, which is, after you've done that first, then you are very harsh in your assessment of what you have produced, and you're ruthless, and you're just like, a day later you're saying, "Oh, that's no good." And so then you have to switch back to the Genesis mode, and I'm not, without any judgment at all.
Mm.
I'm without any critic. I'm just going to produce stuff. And then you go back to that and say, okay, let's see what's there. And so that open mindedness has to be paired with taste and discrimination and judgment and editing and all these other things. And so there's a two-step process that's at the core of any creative endeavor and any growth, I think. And
Well said.
so that open-mindedness is absolutely part of it, but it has to be paired with critical thinking and other aspects like that.
I love it. I have one more piece on conversations before we move on. It's a quote in your book. It says, "A wise man said, before you speak, let your words pass through three gates. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? At the second gate, ask, is it necessary? At the third gate, ask, is it kind?" Can we break that down?
That's Rumi. That's the poet Rumi. He's the wise man who said that. Um, yeah. So kindness is, you can't be too kind. It's better to be kind than right. There's it's we my own observations of being in the world, being around people, and myself, is that I think generally, this is another piece of advice. Generally, say less than necessary, right?
Yes.
And so people say things for different reasons. There's another bit of advice tangentially to this about meetings, which is to kind of have like a business meeting, a brainstorming meeting. If you're having meetings, and most of us work in environments where there are meetings here now and then, if you want to have a really great meeting, a rule of thumb, a heuristic, is that a person should only be allowed to say something if it's something that nobody else in the room knows. Okay, so you aren't just kind of saying things for the sake of saying things that everybody knows already. You're restating it or whatever. So there has to, so we want to inspect why we're saying something. Is it just to prove that we have something to say? Is it to we're just echoing someone else? Is it something that we actually generally believe, or this that we heard? Is it to provoke something. And is it kind? And kind meaning like, does it help? Um, does it work towards good? And so, just kind of in general, uh, inspecting or beforehand, whatever the word I want, prospecting what it is, the intention of why we're saying things, I think is very, 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 very important. And having the kindness filter is kind of one is like an easy way
Hmm.
to have that conversation. Just because if you start thinking about whether it's kind, you can think about all these other things as well.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit of a cover for checking what we're about to say. It's like, okay, is this necessary? Is this helpful? Is this kind? And most of the time, it's not going to be. and so, uh, and so you shut up. I mean, that's basically it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
That reminds me of the other quote that says, "Even if you don't say anything, if you
yeah,
listen carefully, people will consider you a great conversationalist."
exactly right. I've done that at dinner parties where we've had a conversation and they've done most all the talking and they're very, very happy with that. And that's of course what interviewers are. The ratio of, interview
Mhm,
versus interviews is pretty lopsided, but um you want to be actively listening, and that's a whole other trait that we haven't talked about, this kind of active listening. Is how do you become a good active listener? Um and that's part of it.
mhm. Good. The next piece or the next kind of theme was relationships and friendships, and this was a really cool piece. We're talking about kindness. I think it dovetails really well. Don't reserve your kindest praise for a person until their eulogy. Tell them when they are alive, when it makes a difference to them. Write it in a letter so they can keep it. We're continuing this kindness theme, but transitioning to friendships and relationships. Why is it so
Mhm.
important, and why do people not do this?
I don't know. I mean, I've been, because of my age, increasingly going to funerals where just wonderful things are said about that person, and I kept thinking, man, it's just a shame that they're not here, right?
Hmm.
Hear it. And so why don't we do that while they're alive? Um, and we don't have to do it in a kind of collective way, although that's nice too. And though I have seen, um, they call them shifts, friendships or something, where people who are getting older in age have these gatherings, these testimonials, these toast or the roastings or whatever it is. They're actually, it's kind of like a funeral for them while they're still living and they're
Oh,
present.
fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, I was really struck by that. And uh you know I think we should do more of that in a tradition. Like, maybe when you if you reach 90, you automatically get one of these. I don't know, something, 85 or whatever. Um, so, but yeah, you don't have to wait for that. You can again just send somebody a note, and it's incredibly powerful. I have to tell you, if you get one of these, it's like, wow, it's very, very meaningful. It means a lot. It's kind of easy to do. It may be uncomfortable in a certain sense. So yeah, it's I think there's just a little bit of a, what's the word I want? A cultural inertia where it wasn't normally done, but I could easily imagine it becoming kind of a polite, or some kind of etiquette in doing it. Um, so it's like going back and thanking your teachers from school. Not hard to do. It's very impactful, and more people should do it.
You talk a couple times in your book about funerals and why at a young age you should attend as many funerals as you can. Can you open that up?
Yeah, yeah, and the main thing that's really surprising, if you I've been paying attention to them, which is in the eulogies, in the testimonies of the people who are talking about the departed, they don't talk very much about the achievements of that person. They spend most of the time talking about the character of the person, who they were, how they made them feel, um, what they were like. And that to me was revelatory because it's like, wow, not only will I be completely forgotten in 4 generations, but even in the first generation, all the stuff that you're working on, the books that you wrote, and all that kind of stuff aren't going to be even remembered by the time you die. They're people are just going to remember like whether you were kind to them or not. And yeah, so it's helpful to kind of have that perspective as you're kind of trying to prioritize how you spend your day and what you're doing. Um, it's not the only mark of a life, is what people say at your funeral, but it's certainly something that you might want to keep in mind.
Absolutely. There's one more on friendships and relationships. I've heard the first part of this quote, but the way you spun it on the second, I really liked. It says, quote, "Be strict with yourself, forgiving of others. The reverse is hell for everyone." So I've heard
Right,
the first part before. I haven't
right,
heard the
right.
second. So walk me through that part. That's, I mean, that was one of my favorite ones.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, hmm, it's yeah. I mean, the reverse side, the that's the arrogant boss or whatever. That's, in my opinion, a former president that we've recently had who is sees everyone else is making the mistakes. It's all their fault. They're innocent. They're the victim. If something good happens, it's due to them. If something bad happens, there's always somebody else's fault, and that's hell. So the reverse, the heaven, so to speak, is where you take on responsibilities. I mean, there's almost kind of a religious, spiritual aspect to it, where you accept the responsibility, even if it wasn't your fault, and and you extend the credit and the praise to others. That's almost our definition of a saint. I mean, that's sort of the holy person who is generous in that sense, and critical of themselves, and generous with others to elevate them. That can certainly go too far, and there are people who struggle with that asymmetry. And like anything else, there's extreme versions of it, but in general, people can handle um, on a kind of day-to-day basis where you see the fact that uh, a lot of your success, and I'm speaking of people who are successful, really is due to luck. I get been privileged to surround myself with, or to be near people who have a lot of money, a lot of success, billionaires, whatever. And there's kind of a little bit of a range, but the ones that I'm most attracted to, the ones that I most admire, are those that will confess and acknowledge the role luck has played in their own success. And
Interesting.
the ones I find really annoying and very that I dislike are the ones who refuse to accept luck, who believe that their billions were self-made, that they made it, that they're self-reliant, that they didn't rely on other people or luck. And it's just not true. Um, so those that do acknowledge that can understand that they are capable and have failures and weaknesses, and yet are trying to build up the others, that I find them inspiring and other people too. And that goes again to a little bit of advice I say, to kind of, to be s- rich, you want kind of want to succeed, but to be wealthy, you actually want to help others become rich. You want others to succeed. And that sense of helping others to succeed by giving them credit whenever you can, by claiming responsibility for yourself whenever you can, those are the signs of a mature person who, in a certain sense, to me, has a grasp of reality. I think because that is the reality is you, or whoever you are, you're going to be flawed, you're going to have weaknesses, and you this is a way of acknowledging that, of dealing with it. And if you don't see that, you're not seeing reality in a certain sense.
Mm. Yeah, so true. We're getting close on time here. I want to get to one last theme, and the theme, as what I call it, is the process. So, Kevin,
Yeah,
in addition to being a podcaster, I'm also a mental performance coach. I work with mostly high school athletes on upping of their mental game. And one of the
sure,
pieces that I like to teach is the idea of process over outcome, staying
sure.
focused on what's in front of you, staying present. A couple quotes pop out at me, and I'm a little bit more biased because I love the idea of the process. So, one of them says, all the great prizes in life, in wealth, relationships, or knowledge come from the magic of compound interest. By amplifying small, steady gains, all you need for abundance is to keep adding 1% more than you subtract on a regular basis. Then there's one more I think that really lines up. It says, looking ahead, focus on the direction rather than the destination. Maintain the right direction and you'll arrive at where you want to go. I
Right,
love the idea of the process over the outcome. I'd love to hear your
right.
words on it.
Yeah, and I think there was another explicit one about process, which is that, like, to succeed once, you have to, do it well, but to succeed over time, you have to have a process that does well. I didn't say as well as I said it in the book, but that was the general idea, was that, one success can come from an effort, but a reliable ongoing success, you have to have a successful process to produce it. And so you want to focus on that process. What is the process that produces that? Yeah, that's a big thing. And then maybe I should have made more of that, because I think I didn't say it clearly enough in the book. But and that's sort of what a lot of the habit stuff, the Atomic Habits, James Clear, which is like, habits are kind of come from a process. They are a process. And what you wanted to get good at is this good at of, like, the habit making process or the habit breaking process. And so, what is it? And he has kind of some formulas for making it super easy, and, making it the default and stuff like that. Those are all important, but there are other kinds of processes besides habits. There's the process of manufacturing something. Okay, whatever. Those are all manufacturing processes, and so, or the process of having a good life. I think that's another thing. You want what's the process that you have made to make sure your life is going in the right direction. Okay, it's more than just habits. Habits are part of it, but not the only thing. And so yeah, thinking in that way, I think, is very, very rewarding, very profitable. And I think maybe just that insight alone would be enough to get people started, saying that, yeah, you don't know it, but you actually have some process in your life, and it may be an incomplete one, it may be broken, it could certainly be improved. And so think about that as a system. There's a system, and the system is generating this. A lot of people, unfortunately, are aimed at it just generating money. Um, I think that's very misguided, but you could generate contentment. You might be able to generate fame. That's another misguided idea, where they want a process that generates fame. No, you don't. You really don't. But and so that's one of the things that you have to decide. What's the process optimizing? What are you optimizing in your life? And you know, you you're allowed to change that over time, but you should have an answer to the question.
Mhm. A lot of people talk a lot about you need to trust the process. And I always like to say, well, in order to trust the process, you first need to have a process.
Right,
And then,
right,
addition to that, another big component is you got to be able to trust it, but you also have to be able to stay really freaking patient with it. And you
right.
talk about this twice. You say most overnight success, in fact, any significant success, takes at least 5 years. Budget your life accordingly. Another one says,
Yeah.
we tend to overestimate what we can do in a day and underestimate what we can achieve in a decade. Miraculous things can be accomplished if you give it 10
Mhm.
years. A long game will compound small gains that will be able to overcome even big mistakes. So, as we close down, talk to me about not only having the process, but being patient with the process.
Yeah, I think elsewhere I said that there's, a lot of success is really just patience, right? If you're in the long haul, and one of the things about the long haul is it allows you to be optimistic, and optimism is allows you to believe something could be made or done or achieved, and that's the first ingredient of being able to achieve it. You have to kind of believe it, and if you take a longer view, there's more room to believe that, because in fact, the part about overcoming setbacks is true. It's like, yeah, if you're invested in the stock market, but you are the kind of buy and hold, and you're just there taking low percentage a year, then those compounded over time, the stock can drop tremendously, and you're not bothered because you know that over the long term, it will overcome even those kinds of things. And so yes, that long view is important, and it's important because you can overcome the inevitable setbacks, but also um, because it shifts, I think, the p- the payoff, which is you want. I think we want lasting contentment. We want lasting peace. We want we want an understanding that endures. And so that requires a longer view, that we don't want just the momentary delight. What we really crave, and that's what children crave, is they crave that stability and that reliability, and so that requires a longer view. And by the way, that's another piece of advice about child rearing and kids, is that when kids are growing up, one of the things I did not know when I was younger, I wish I had known, was the role of rituals and things in family life, and the way that family identity is so important for kids that prosper. And I think it comes from the fact that it gives them kind of an anchor and reliability when they're inventing their own identity. If they have an identity of the family, that gives them a little bit of a base and an anchor to kind of develop their own identity, which is very, I mean, it's kind of scary and difficult and what it is, but if they can retreat to the identity of the family, which they don't have to make up, they get that, that's given to them. If you can articulate it as a parent, it's like, this is what our family does, and here's where we're, and we're kind of our parent, we're a long line of this, or that this is what our family does, and other families don't do that, and here's what we're about, and our family is about X. And so that's, you don't want to do that with your kid. You want your kid to assemble or devise their own identity, but if you give them the family identity as a starting point, something to rely on. So even though a ritual might be having pancakes on Sunday morning, every Sunday morning, no matter what, or I have a friend who does a pizza night on Friday with movies, no matter what, that is incredibly anchoring. It's reliable. They can count on that. It becomes this foundation for doing all these other hard things. And so and that again comes from kind of like having a larger view of the family and the long view, and providing help for all of us as we try to do these other things in real time and make up our own identity.
Very cool. Kevin, my last question for you.
Yeah.
There's 250 pages, 300 pages of advice here. What is your favorite chunk of advice, and what can you leave my audience with?
Don't aim to be the best, aim to be the only. is a very high bar to try and figure out what it is that only you can do. But the best is a crowded place. There's lots of competition. There can only be one winner. But if you're headed to be the only in something, you have you'll have it all to yourself. You won't have much competition. Um, and you'll be doing things that you find easy and other people find hard. It's a very, very high bar to get there. It'll take most of your life to figure it out, and you'll never reach it. It's not a destination. Again, it's a direction. So what you want to be doing is aiming your life towards that direction. And it might be that that weird thing that you had as a kid might be the signal of what it is that you're doing only that no one else really can do or wants to do. So, you know, the best is someone else's movie. Try to be a star in your own movie. Don't be the best, be the only.
Love it. Kevin, where can I point my listeners to help support you?
I can be found at my initials, kk.org. And I'm the Kevin2, number 2 Kelly on the socials. Yes, excellent advice for living. It's now available. Get one. Oh, and if you have kids, your kids don't listen to you, but they'll listen to someone else.
That's right. That's true. Hey, and with Mother's Day and Father's Day coming up,
Yeah.
this is a great book, a great gift
Yeah.
book, and it's something that I'm going to gift for my parents. So that's another great idea for listeners out there.
Great.
Awesome. Kevin, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. I loved it. A lot of fun. Thank you.